All right, you've made it to, well, at least to here. This video will be about cancer. I'm not a doctor, I'm a naturopath, but I do have common sense and I do a lot of research for myself. And I believe that freedom and health are not separate. So to have that liberty and to be health conscious and understand those things, they're not two different states, they're one state. Liberty and freedom and health are the same thing to me. So if you're able to have health, you're free, and if you're not, then you can be a slave to medical slavery or from big pharma or whatever you want to call that. You can get lost into that whole world. So fight for your way back to sanity and natural ways to do these things. And it doesn't mean that it's all anti-medicine and which I think is ridiculous. I think there's a lot of good in medicine and even in the urgency care and even in crazy pills that they give to schizophrenics and they come back into the world for a second. Like that's powerful. And that's 10,000 years of concentrated wisdom in those pills, whether we like to admit that or not. There's a lot of wisdom there. But it's usually oriented around urgency care, and that's kind of okay. But we don't want to live our life in a state of urgency, so we have to find a way to heal our deficiencies and not need to be going to the hospital or the doctor. And so that can be something which is much more of a rare occurrence in a free world. So this idea of cancer, and magnesium, I found a lot of research online and just weighing it, and there's really no argument about magnesium and cancer, except for they always try to shut down the molecule of magnesium because they don't have a copyright on such a simple. So there's always going to be studies out there that try to defeat those simple things. So that don't worry if you find a study and showing magnesium creates tumors or this, that, and the other. Because like the editor of the Lancet said recently, that 50% of the studies in the journal he's the editor for, are fake. That's what he said. He didn't say fake. He said they were biased, and so they were not true because they're the way they're funded. And we should have known that all these studies are biased, most of them. Now, who's funding them? Why do they want those results? Why can't you find certain types of studies and on genetic foods, and there's just a lot of stuff that's out there just kind of keeping us from really figuring things out. So we at some point have to stop going, well, where's the study? And it's like, well, why don't you try to use your intuition a little bit, and you might figure out that maybe they're a step ahead of you. And so even if you can't prove what's happening, sometimes you have to guess your way into it and find a way to defend yourself. Because sometimes, like with glyphosate, for example, to pick one example, we started figuring that out 4 or 5 years ago, but it's been going for 20. So we could have said 10 years ago, where's the study? And there may not have been one. But we would have sat there for 10 years getting all of that into us. So we have to be smarter than just trying to seek material proof of everything. We have to be able to use our intuition and our heart and mind, not just our logic. There's a twofold system here. So, so the cancer idea. So how magnesium contributes to helping or staving off or avoiding cancer to a certain degree is just, of course, we're not trying to say it's a cure for cancer, but it's needed to. A lot of the studies that they've done have shown that the membranes of the cells are impaired during cancer. There's a flux that's not healthy. There's an overpermeable. And so magnesium actually has the same low magnesium, magnesium deficiency has the same characteristics of the cell membrane. So there's a connection right there that you can make. And so how important is magnesium, for the cells? And anything that's going to be that important for the cells is going to be that important for cancer, because cancer is the anarchy of those cells and dysfunction and things that happen to once that anarchy is set up, that Pandora's box is open. So look at it. Like another key feature is calcium. Calcium is a key feature in destruction of cells, cell apoptosis and killing of the cells, and rigidifying of the structures in the tissues, and calcification, and just that is all limited by magnesium levels. Magnesium levels are the buffer of that reality. And if we have the right ratio, which is like 1-to-1 ratio, and that ratio can't happen without in our foods today, because our foods, even if you compare them with the foods from the 20s, they've lost all their magnesium within themselves. So how are you going to get that magnesium back? Just magically make it into the soil, or eat some bananas and you're good? Like, no, it's ubiquitous. And so you have to figure out a way to do it like our ancestors did, which is to go to the sea and bathe in the mineral-rich waters of certain parts of Europe, and they had these spa culture, bath culture of antiquity, and so they found the transdermal route, which is what we do now in a modern format at the Heart of Traditions, where you're using blue glass bottles with transdermal magnesium from the Zechstein Inside certification, and you're putting this directly on the skin. So not only for cramps and pains and everything else, but also for magnesium levels. Increasing the tissues level and saturating those tissues over 4 or 5 months, 6 months. I mean, my first round took me 7 or 8 months of doing it to get out of that deficiency. Once you're out, you don't use it as much, but you still use it for certain things. It's amazing for tooth pain, and there's a lot of, hygiene stuff and healing, and, it's like a little first aid kit in a bottle, for a lot of different things, from infection to scabbing and wounds and things that you can use it for. Now, you don't use it pure in all of those different cases. Some cases you dilute it, some cases you use it pure. So that'll all depend on what you're trying to do and how weak the tissue is or structure. But so you're just learning how to use it. But so I was looking at some of the leukemia, and so you have these cells that are overly smooth. So that smoothness of that cell is creating a lack of viscosity, because it's overly smooth. There's not this gritty viscosity. Even the product we're talking about, the Transdermal Magnesium, there's this gritty viscosity there. And so this viscosity, and it pulls water from the atmosphere too. So it has that quality of that holding that hydrogen and holding that water in there. So that allows for a kind of a gritty coating on the cells, and not only structurally, but even as an added thing that's being used abundantly throughout all these membrane transfers. And so when the cells are too smooth, well, they don't have this viscosity, and then they start to, at a very micro level, start to crack. And that's also, once again, the calcification is happening there too. So when the cracks are there, and then there's not flexibility because there's leakage, and so you become too permeable without the magnesium. So the low levels of magnesium in the blood and the tissues, but especially the tissues, because the body's going to take from the tissues and bring it back into the areas that she needs it. And so it's not always going to be, well, how much is in the blood? And that's a really basic magnesium test. So that doesn't show hardly anything. The real test of magnesium, which most doctors know, is they test the blood cells in the skin, not just the serum. And so we have to find the right way to test these things, and then we realize that our levels are not optimal at all. They're just not pathological per se. So just trying to help you understand that everything that's at the cellular level, like the cells spend 30% of their energy trying to push calcium out. And so that is trying to avoid the rigidification process and the death process. And so magnesium comes in there and renders that whole process flexible so that the calcium can be used to the right degree or buffered or limited if need be. And so that whole process, think about the teeth. The teeth are brittle if they were just calcium, right? So the magnesium comes in there, renders them flexible at a certain quantity, and then that creates a strong structure. So it's strong because it's flexible to a certain degree. If it was just brittle and just calcium, then it would break or it would not be. So that's how everything is working. It's that simple. It's viscosity and flexibility of the structure, and they go together. And so that is the key to what magnesium is doing at every level of the body, from the blood platelets being able to onload and offload oxygen better because the blood's not over sticky in presence of that magnesium, or it's not overly viscous. Lack of viscosity, overly permeable, too sticky, cracky. And so it gives it that right balance. And so that's what it's doing at every level of all the tissues and the structure. And so that's how it's working in the body for cancer. They did studies on prostate cancer, and they were analyzing all these people who had eaten all these dairy products, and there was like 50% more cases of prostate cancer in these groups. And so, but that's because the dairy products are over here, right? And they've been produced and pasteurized and industrialized, and the quality and the chemicals, and then the milk has estrogen in it because of the way they're feeding the cows, and then everything is like hormonal, like your body's got to fight through all that. And so, but when you have the proper foods and a proper understanding of vitamin D and magnesium, those levels are high, then those foods are not so harmful. Now, of course, we do have to find the right foods, but I'm just saying that the harm is coming from the vitamin D and the magnesium deficiencies that are allowing this calcium to come into the body and not have anywhere to go properly, and then not be aimed properly by the vitamin D, which aims it into the tissues or the bones or whatever, and it has this kind of organizing capacity, triggering it like on-off codes to help it find where it needs to go. And so these signals are not present, and then you have the magnesium, which is also helping to limit its damage in the areas where it is going like in a ubiquitous way. And so that you need that combination. Why do you think that we used to eat milk? The basic food in like Switzerland and some of these older, or even in America, pick anywhere, or even during the war in France when they had no food, it was just bread and milk, raw milk and black bread. Why they associate those two was because the magnesium and the calcium go together. And then of course, if you put I think they would eat the bread with like a little bit of pork fat, because that was the cheapest you could get. That was cheaper than even pork meat, so you could get the fat even if you were poor, the lard or whatever. So there you go. You have the vitamin D, the magnesium, and the calcium. Boom. And so if you have those three basic ideas, those three cheapest ideas, I guess you could say at that time, you can create health to a certain degree. And so that was where people mainstayed. So we have to understand this stuff. And so the prostate thing, that reality is coming from there too, the calcification of the cells, the natural calcium channel blocker, which is magnesium, which was given as such before we had all this synthetic medicine for hypertension. This was that in the body, and that's what it does if the levels are high enough. Now, why do our ancestors teach us about this Greek and Roman bath culture and putting this through the skin? Well, we're learning that now. We're relearning that you can't just do everything through food, and you have to also understand the skin and how that brings it into the tissues. Your skin and your nervous system are very similar, embryonically. They're very similar. And so bringing that to the skin is going to bring that to the nervous system. That's, I guess, that's why they say put it on the stomach. A lot of people put it on the abdomen, and this is the solar plexus, which is the center of the nervous system. So parasympathetic nervous system. So Some other things to note is like what steals magnesium in the body: coffee, alcohol, drugs, the pill, sugar, um, stress, injury, um, anything, adrenaline. So that was just a few things I wrote down. Um, Magnesium controls the entry of calcium and sodium into the cells, not just calcium channel blocker, but also sodium. And so that the sodium and the calcium just rigidify the structure. And so you need the potassium to come in there, and the magnesium and the potassium, that's that other side, that more and allowing, without the magnesium, the ATP cycle of energy cycle at the cellular level to produce energy is not stable. It has to be stabilized through magnesium. So when it's stable, then the cell can produce transcription of RNA and DNA to repair the cell and get out what it doesn't need, or the toxins or things in the environment from heavy metals. I mean, magnesium we know protects from heavy metals in and of itself. That's been proven for beryllium and nickel and cadmium and mercury and things like that. I mean, mercury can only be eliminated through, one of the only ways to eliminate it in the body is through glutathione, which is produced in the liver. And glutathione is, you could put a parenthesis after glutathione and put magnesium in it, because that's how dependent glutathione is on magnesium. So all of this stuff is true. And so cleaning out the toxic environment through the RNA and everything, this is what the viruses are doing. This is what we need done. We need to clean that stuff out. You can live your life in natural immunity going forward, or you can live your life in medical slavery. You have to either heal these things and get these toxins out and learn something and deepen and maybe admit you might have been wrong about some things, than just sit there and not evolve and hope that we're just going to like heal by magically cutting ourselves off from everybody else and putting masks on everywhere and just becoming isolates. And so no, that's not going to work. That's actually going the wrong direction. And it sends a signal to our children, our masks, and birthday. I mean, it's just crazy. You have to get out of that way of thinking. It's a form of slavery, and you have to fight your way out of it. So we know that magnesium chloride improves the granulocyte activity of the white blood cells. The white blood cell. You have the granulocytes, which is like the neutrophils, basophils, eosinophils, and so these are their activities increased in presence with magnesium chloride. That's been proven for a long time now, and I think the French doctors proved that. Delbé and Robinet. Well, he was a scientist, but anyway. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I don't really think that it needs to go any further, because without the low magnesium levels is a bed for cancer. So that's where we're getting at. It's not that we're trying to say this will cure this stage 4 whatever. No, what we're saying is that the bed is laid there, and the bed of a lot of infection and cancer, and a lot of the bed of that is also inflammation. And inflammation is a key feature that happens when we have the calcium breaking all the tissues and creating rigidity and all this stuff. This is that lack of viscosity and flexibility once again. This is the most simple way to describe it. And so this creates inflammation. Inflammation creates more acidity, and then that you start the whole process, and then tumorigenesis and trying to take these toxins and build something around them so they're no longer harmful, and we can't get them out properly, and there's just like the body goes berserk. So anyway, don't buy the cheap stuff. Get the right stuff. If you want to recharge this magnesium properly, it takes 4 to 6 months. It only costs you about $3 a week to do it, but you need to get the right stuff. Blue glass bottles from Zechstein Inside. If it doesn't have the Zechstein Inside logo, I wouldn't mess with it. And if it's in plastic, I wouldn't mess with it either. There's plenty of genuine and ancient and Permian and all these other self-certified claims out there, but they're not coming from the actual source in Holland, Vindam, which is the city where this natural salt formation is found. You can call them yourself and talk to them. That nobody else will give you that. They can send you as many certificates from whatever labs they want, but they won't let you talk to the people. So when you start talking to people, you start realizing that this is the only source, and why is this not on the label, and why are they not using this source? And so you start realizing, because solvent extracted stuff from Asia can easily be marketed and remarketed as European origin, and here we go. We can have a whole range of products from the very start, and we look like we have a whole catalog, and everybody's happy. But it just doesn't work that way. The real stuff, um, you have to seek out the quality. If the quality's not there, then it's solvent extracted, and when it's solvent extracted, it loses a lot of its chelation properties and uptake and a lot of its cellular bonding capacity and all these other capacities that you don't want to mess with at such a deep level of deficiency as magnesium. So do it right. Come check us out, theheartoftradition.com.